Hello students, we are to start with Coleridge and his work Biographia Literaria, where we'll come across his critical views on all artistic creations. Biographia Literaria was the outcome of almost 6 months hard labor on the part of Coleridge. Its manuscript was complete by September 1815 and it was handed over to the publisher, but it got published in July 1817, when to the 22 chapters that he had written for Biographia Literaria, he added 3 of his letters he wrote home from Germany and the final conclusion that he gave to it, which contains an impassioned defense of his religious orthodoxy. Now, the 2 volumes of Biographia Literaria were complete according to the publisher, and it came out in 1817 after a delay of nearly 2 years. So Coleridge, as we know, was a man of stupendous learning, and he was influenced by the German and modern philosophers, especially Kant and Schelling. But he develops his theories according to his own knowledge and experience. His critical theories, they are based on metaphysics and psychology. He brought poetry closer to philosophy, and he made criticism a part of philosophical enquiry. And he discovers the power of the soul that he calls imagination, primary and secondary imagination as he terms them, which according to him is the cardinal force behind all artistic creations. Imagination also, he feels, enables us to perceive the outer reality, and this he terms as primary imagination. Coleridge was also the first one to introduce psychology into literary criticism. His concept of fancy and imagination is based on his knowledge of human psychology. And his practical criticism, this reveals his unique power of critical analysis and his ability to discover literary beauty even where critics normally fail to find it. So in Biographia Literaria, we see that he gives a critical appreciation of Wordsworth's poetry. So he makes a comprehensive estimate of all his defects and his virtues, and he gives ample examples as well to support his viewpoint. So we learn about all this in our later sessions, when we'll deal with chapters 14 and 17 of Biographia Literaria that are prescribed for you. For now, let's begin with a brief introduction to Coleridge and his work Biographia Literaria. Before we start with the Biographia Literaria, let's have a cursory look on the life and works of Coleridge. Coleridge, who was the 10th and the youngest child of a clergyman and schoolmaster, was born at Ottery St. Mary in Devonshire on October 23, 1772. His father was a county parson and was well known for his knowledge of books and also for his ignorance of the practical affairs of life. Coleridge, as a boy, was a dreamy, indolent one, extremely fond of reading fairy tales, whereas his mother, she somehow understood the world and its affairs better than his father, and she did her best in order to advance her son's interests in life. After the death of his father in 1781, he joined the Christ's Hospital, a school for poor children in London. There he got admitted as a preferment, that is, as a charity boy. He lived at school in severe loneliness, but the inspired charity boy Coleridge, he found adequate compensation in his mastery of traditional classical studies and his wide acquaintance with other scholarly disciplines like metaphysics and theology. So, bereft of parental affection and the company of friends and relatives, he lived at school in severe loneliness. But he uh, got acquainted with all these classical subjects, and this was a kind of a compensation for his loneliness. Here he was full of plans for his future life, ranging from the profession of a cobbler to a wholehearted devotion to literature. One day he was anxious to be a cobbler, the other day he wanted to be a physician, and on yet another day he was seen reciting Homer and Pindar. So constantly, every day, his future plans kept on changing. In 1791, he joined Cambridge. From there, he ran away to join the army, but he realized that it was a mistake on his part to have done this, and he returned to the university and remained there till 1794. On his return from the university, after a fateful meeting with the poet Robert Southey, whose sister-in-law, Sarah Fricker, he later married in great haste, Coleridge was for a while lost in a utopian dream after this marriage, and he got engaged in a scheme of reforming humanity. He was lost in a utopian dream. He was in order to he was planning to establish an ideal community which he named Pentisocracy, consisting of 12 gentlemen of good education and liberal principles and 12 ladies. So this was a form of utopian social organization he was trying to form, in which all are equal in social position and responsibility. And the place that was chosen for this society, this community to get established in, was the banks of the river Susquehanna in America. But this dream could not be very well realized, and it is said that the end of Pentisocracy was the beginning of reality's dark dream for Coleridge. His bitter married life with Sarah Fricker, because she was rather their marriage did not prove to be a happy one, because he and his wife, they were temperamentally unsuited to each other. She was quite critical of his weaknesses, and she did not have the sympathy and imagination to understand the great qualities of Coleridge, and that's why the marriage turned out to be a bitter one after initial happiness and the poverty that followed in the wake of increasing domestic responsibilities that they had to bear with. So Coleridge, for a short period of time after this, he entered the Unitarian ministry. So the unitary chapel that he joined, the Unitarian chapel that believes in, or it has a belief that God in Christianity is considered by the Unitarians as one person, as opposed to the Trinitarians, where in the Trinity they believe that God is one being in three persons, that is the Father, the Son and the Holy Spirit. That is the three persons of the Christian Godhead. So Hazlitt, he happened to meet here Coleridge on the occasion of his preachings in the Unitarian chapel at Shrewsbury, and he was enamored by his eloquence and exposition, the subtlety of his mind and the force of his arguments, and he was quite impressed by Coleridge. However, his religious opinion changed. Coleridge changed from a Unitarian to a Trinitarian under the influence of the German philosophers like Kant and Schelling. He met later in 1797 Wordsworth, and a long friendship followed thereafter. The happy influence of Wordsworth and Dorothy had an influence on his poetic imagination that helped him mature as a poetic genius, and his poetic career flourished. Dorothy, she was greatly struck by his genius and his attractive personality, and she said about him, "He is a wonderful man. His conversation teems with soul, mind and spirit." That is, everything is involved. The soul, mind and spirit of his are involved while he is conversing with people. Then he is so benevolent, kind, so good tempered and cheerful, and like William. So he is a friend, a brother like William. At first I thought him very plain, that is for about 3 minutes, but her opinion towards him changed. His eye is large and full and not very dark, but grey, such an eye as would receive from a heavy soul the dullest expression, but it speaks every emotion of his animated mind. It has more of the poet's eye in a fine frenzy rolling than I have ever witnessed. He has fine dark eyebrows and an overhanging forehead. So the earlier poems of Coleridge are Songs of the Pixies, the Lines on an Autumnal Evening, and Religious Musings. In these poems we find a spiritual interpretation of the universe along with a rich yet delicate appreciation of the beauties of the physical world. The second and maturer period of his poetic career begins with his intimacy with Wordsworth and his sister Dorothy. The poetic fruits of this intimacy are Odes to the Departing Year, To France, This Lime Tree Bower, Frost at Midnight, and Fears in Solitude. But the full flowering of his genius came with the great trinity of poems written during the Annus Mirabilis, that is in Latin means Year of Wonders. So this year was a year of wonders for Coleridge when these three poems, The Ancient Mariner, Kubla Khan and Christabel, were written. And these are the most famous poems of his. Around 1800, Coleridge's creative powers began to decline, though the poet in him never ceased to exist. The former vigor and a more powerful integration of thought and feeling than any of his mature poems can still be perceptible in one or two pieces which were written much later, like Ode to Dejection and Love's First Hope. The first edition of the Lyrical Ballads, which was a joint venture of Wordsworth and Coleridge, it was published in 1798, bringing name and fame for the two friends. But early in the next century, Coleridge suffered from severe physical pain that developed into a psychosomatic sickness. So it is a kind of a disease caused and aggravated by mental stress. And because of this sickness, he became addicted to opium intake. And about this he says, "It acted like a charm, like a miracle initially. I recovered the use of my limbs, of my appetite, of my spirits. So there was a soothing effect of this opium intake on him, said Coleridge. But the healing effect was a temporary one, and he developed an acute pain in his limbs, and a continued use of opium produced its bad effect on him, causing melancholy and a depression of spirit in him. His son later, Hartley Coleridge, who was a very promising young man and a very promising academic career he had, but he was expelled from Oxford University in 1819 because of drunkenness, and this further aggravated Coleridge's misery, making him more melancholy, his health getting worse and his opium intake increasing to larger quantities. So his literary activity came to a standstill, and the last 10 years of his life are well remembered only for his brilliant literary talks. He fascinated his audience by his eloquence of thought and expression, and his original and marvelously brilliant ideas on every conceivable topic on earth attracted the greatest celebrities of that age, like Emerson and Carlyle, to visit him. So in the summer of 1834, while dictating his religious views to a friend, his voice slowly grew inaudible, and he fell unconscious and quietly passed away a few hours later. Wordsworth, on hearing the news of his death, said, "He was the most wonderful man that I have ever known." Lamb described him as an archangel slightly damaged. He was deeply lamented by one and all. In spite of his physical infirmities, he was a great man, much admired for his gifted and unique mental strength and most original ideas. It was Coleridge who persuaded Wordsworth to write a preface for the second edition of the Lyrical Ballads, which was published in 1800, and to present his literary theories in it, in the preface. Wordsworth, he tried to pose and answer two closely connected questions in the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. First was, what relation should the language of poetry bear to that of ordinary life? To which his answer was, the real language of men in a state of vivid sensation. So the language of poetry should be the real language of ordinary men. And secondly, what relation should the subject of poetry bear to life itself? And his answer was, in the incidents of common life. So the subject matter should be the common day-to-day incidents of daily life. Wordsworth, on the manuscript of Baron Field's biography of himself, wrote that the preface was written at the request of Mr. Coleridge out of sheer good nature. Coleridge himself claimed that it was half a child of my own brain. In fact, it was he who at first thought of writing the preface himself, but gave up the idea later, and he passed on his notes to Wordsworth. But subsequently, with the passage of time, Coleridge began to differ from Wordsworth's theory of poetic diction. In Biographia Literaria, he not only attacks this theory of Wordsworth, but he also says that except in a few poetical passages, which are not of a very high order, Wordsworth himself does not follow his own theory of poetic diction. And a considerable part of the Biographia is his adverse criticism of Wordsworth's theory of poetic diction. Wordsworth, no doubt, was unhappy with his attack because it was Coleridge himself who had encouraged him to enunciate his poetic diction in the preface to the Lyrical Ballads. Coleridge did not approve of Wordsworth's views on poetic diction, as expressed in the preface, and said that poetic diction required a certain aloofness from the language of real life, which I think is deadly to poetry. That is, ordinary common people's language that is not suitable enough for poetry. This is what Coleridge believed about the uh, poetic diction. By July 1815, Coleridge completed the first part of the Biographia, that is, the first 13 chapters, written in autobiographical form, containing his metaphysical inquiry and discussions. Regarding it as a complete book, Coleridge started writing a preface to it, but it grew to an enormous length, this preface, and it was almost the same size as the book itself. This became the second part of the Biographia Literaria, forming the chapters 14 to 22 that examined Wordsworth's theories of the language and subject matter of poetry, what kind of language should be used in poetry, and what should be the subject matter of poetry. The theory of philosophy being the link between the two parts. Philosophy could explain and establish this theory. A discussion of the language and subject of poetry could then apply it. In 1817, Biographia Literaria appeared in 2 volumes, but was adversely reviewed by the Blackwoods, while the Quarterly Review ignored it altogether. So the adverse criticism of the book was largely due to the form of the book, which was a very queer mixture of philosophy, aesthetics, and autobiography. The psychological drawback that Coleridge was suffering from at the time of the composition of the book, and this drawback was his inability to concentrate on a single topic for a long period of time. And this inability is well reflected in the book, that is, neither Coleridge's autobiography nor a systematic account of his philosophical and literary ideas, but it is a strange mixture of the two. Still, the book was a novel achievement in its own way. Through his theory of imagination, he established a new unity between philosophy and literature in this Biographia Literaria of his. His critical theories, they are based on metaphysics and psychology. He gave a deep philosophical basis to literary criticism, bringing poetry closer to philosophy and making criticism a part of philosophical enquiry. He discovered the power of the soul, which repeats in a finite way, and on principles of beauty, the divine act of creation. He named his power imagination, which according to him is the cardinal force behind all artistic creations. That is, imagination is behind all artistic creations. Imagination also enables us to perceive the outer reality. Coleridge was the first to introduce psychology into literary criticism. His conception of imagination and fancy is based on his knowledge of human psychology. Coleridge discovers the creative power behind all art and literature. Good literature embodies strong emotion and reveals the principle of imagination at work. The critic's function lies in examining this seminal principle of imagination and its expression in the form of literature. So this is a kind of an introduction to Biographia Literaria, what exactly is there in the in his work Biographia Literaria, which the chapters that are prescribed for you, chapter 14 and 17, we'll be reading in taking up in detail.